Hello everyone, channel update today after a long time, more than a year as a matter of fact, or at least exactly 1 year, at least from the last unregular, let's say exceptional update that on that occasion I made compared to the usual ones. So in this video I will discuss many things. First of all, given that after 1 year I didn't make any channel update, not maybe during the holiday season for a general wish and or some broader reflections through which also some of you have come to know me, let's say more generally than just the historical topics, but still about Schwerpunkt, because you know that I don't talk about myself much, telling you the truth. And of course, telling what this channel is for those that throughout all this time have subscribed. As a matter of fact, 1,200 people, and there is a trend towards a sharp increase, and I will talk about this now. So what the channel has been about from, say, not necessarily the beginning, but let's say what in the last years happened really, and why I'm even making this video. And then I'll, generally speaking, update you also about the new content, what I'm up to and what the channel is gonna be about. I will probably make some propagandistic video about how to, in fact, spread Schwerpunkt more at some level. And in order to ask for that, at least I ask for it every at the end of every video, but that's kind of a mechanic habit rather. But it's really connected to the purpose, of course, of it all, right? You wouldn't quite get it if I am not clearer with you. And it's been a bumpy ride in a sense, or at least a rough journey, depending on the aspects at least on what you want to concentrate. Because last year I was fundamentally in deep trouble, morally, right? I had just been heartbroken specifically, and I basically was fucked up in the head for a very long time. And on Schwerpunkt, I don't know whether my content, let's say, could reflect that. Some of you probably say, yeah, we know that when you talk about bloodshed and the Indo-European doctrine of self-sacrifice and other kind of other things. Well, there is some of that, as we will see now. But objectively, I think I used Schwerpunkt as always to just maintain control through a routine, a schedule, etc., because it was really hard, right? I had never experienced this specific hardness in my life. I had already been heartbroken many years ago, the only other time, and this time, however, was that hard because I guess I'm older and I cared more deeply about this all. As I just told you, it was a rare obedience in my life, even in the first place, to meet a woman that could be the one, right? So it had assumed almost kind of a religious meaning, right? I was essentially coming out of this tough, right, dark period that I went through actually smoothly. I'm talking about 2020, not much because of COVID. That didn't actually, it struck my family, right? It killed my grandmother. It was a kind of put some strains on me because that was the last year of my doctorate, and all the libraries were closed, so we didn't know how which say scholarship extension we would got. And fortunately, we were supported by the same libraries, or at least some that kept working through digitalization and contact with the other, etc. And that was the least problem. Like, there was some anxiety connected to that. The same doctorate was quite demanding, and it was a multi-year project that until the end, you don't really know how it's gonna go. That year, there was a striking series of misfortunes. My family, fortunately not, well, I mentioned my grandmother, but, she was very old at least. Yeah, I'm talking about, unfortunately, much younger people, not close to my, say, direct, like, not my parents, as I'm an only son, and that's more or less my more direct sphere, say, of familiar interaction, right? I have many uncles and aunts and cousins, and some of these people, very young, also got terrible illnesses, had, and mostly that, really, but in a horrifying series of, and the thing, oddly enough, went on also for throughout 2021, and even this year again. So very serious things, by the way, and those things either didn't shake me really much, but it was this mounting kind of sense and feeling of, at least the first year of the pandemic, we didn't understand very much where this was going. We understood it was relatively mild, right? That we got lucky, but it's mostly about all that it entailed, kind of in mindset, politically, socioeconomically, culturally, all the issues that have fundamentally been unlocked by the pandemic, even the war. I actually I foresaw that. I thought that Russia would have done such thing. If you remember last year, actually, no time, I already began to say that. And even though we knew that they had planned this so-called, exercises and so on. So that was that idea. The year had started with some kind of, awareness about those things, at least if you're interested in at that level of international policy. But, it's all part of a whole, right? That's something we have seen historically in many cases, that there is never like one single factor. It's just like a sum of all, like a chain, like a bigger system. And of course, things are not going to get better soon. At least, we hope for that. But that's yet another topic that I normally don't discuss, because partly I will address something, at least in terms of the audience, that and what I got from it, etc. But the broader concept is that until I got, infatuated with that girl who was also dramatically close in profession, in interest, in very specific things. She worked in, to my medieval warfare interests. I got kind of literally, I think, traumatized by the event. I didn't feel anything. Like, I'm a person that, I don't know, if somebody dies, I'm sad, but it doesn't touch me deeply. If I see tragedy, violence, I can see blood, pain, whatever. That's all something that that people, it doesn't really affect me. That thing affected me in a way that I had never been affected before. And the reason, of course, is my head, right? Because most problems that we get when people go through similar events, they tell you, don't think about it, just, don't worry, right? Accept it, move on. The point is that, your head is getting somewhere that you have, first of all, wanted to get to. And secondly, let's say, just pretending, and it's also kind of victimizing people by telling them, yeah, there are bad people out there that will break your heart and leave and treat you like shit and all these things, are all aimed at essentially making, let's say, making you lie to yourself and pretending that you are just the poor victim that must be understood, and you shouldn't make any analysis, any self-criticism, or nothing, rather. And this is beyond how things happen, really, because in my case, I think that objectively, yes, I was up to the thing, I did mistakes, but they were, say, not the serious bad ones, but that were enough at least to probably untrigger from the other side certain feelings. And so I was destroyed mostly by that, by the fact that eventually, telling the truth, this person actually played on that and made me feel worse. And she insulted me and offended me in ways that I honestly didn't deserve. And I honestly, at least, there was probably some lying entailed. I never lied. I abhorred that. I don't think that's a manly thing to do. Of course, a woman, you could say, in this sense, could lie. Where I would be considered a sexist by common standards, but I think that's actually an objective depiction. In a sense, no, women shouldn't lie either, right? They can be the Apollonian Uranian type, and then there are the ones that instead use strange kind of ways to get out of situations, making you even feel bad about that. The person didn't really have an easy life, and she had gone through pretty harsh traumas in her own ways, well, as war. No, not the one in Ukraine. That this happened, we're talking about autumn 2020, winter 2021. I mean, this was another era, another country. In any case, I let's say I felt very badly about this, and I had, I went on like it was just under the same chemicals for at least, I think, in fact, last year, kind of, perhaps even up to July, etc. Then I transitioned in a kind of more paranoid phase that is the one that you get. In my case, I think it was mostly adrenaline addiction. I was told, actually, I talked to my uncle, who was a psychiatrist, and I was told exactly what I had sorted out, what was going on in my head. And he told me, look, that's a severe thing, because I had, in my life, I've never had kind of mental issues. Thank God, like, I'm a healthy person, never had really any kind of problem, nor mental, nor physical. That was the only time which I think I had a substantial anxiety crisis of some way. It was not even anxiety as a broader, as in the worst possible way. Like, I've been talking also to people who suffered of anxiety disorders, and sometimes they tell you, they start freaking out because of they fixate, they have to distract themselves because they fear senselessly anything. In my case, it was like more, I think it was an adrenaline addiction with some even some kind of rage issues, right? But kind of repressed rage rather than I never broke down. I mean, from the external, it was normal, right? I was not sleeping, so I looked exhausted, etc. But let's say it was the normal me. There is something about my life, I can say proudly, in a sense, that I never lost control of myself. Like, I never, banally, I know it's not the same thing, but I never passed out, for example. I never, like, to me, what happens in the present is I know I'm in control, right? And I can't get more or less triggered, and even I'm pretty confrontational and even aggressive against, people who, deserve that, in, mostly random morons that, disturb others in public or private situations, but not really because I've ever been violent and never beaten anyone, as a matter of fact. I mean, it's been never done anything like that. But, verbally and physically I pose myself in quite aggressive ways, and I'm well built, I'm tall and everything, but sometimes I can assure you I also managed to shoot just with my side, because it didn't look comforting at all. Much larger people than me, and much probably more violently inclined people than me, because I don't kid when I get like that. Well, in this case, I had an enormous frustration, and I began to fixate. Not really, again, I discovered throughout all this that I had a great moral backbone. That the first time I remember I got heartbroken, I felt down in kind of properly had been switched off, right? This time I kept going, right? You have seen it also with Schwerpunkt. I've kept working. I must confess, actually stopped writing, working like I got my PhD last year in July, and of course I had, it was really exhausting. I must tell you that, there is apparently a higher degree of somewhat even depression, stress. I think never had any of this, honestly, because again, I'm always methodical. I've always been working, so the work was not like, but there were some unknowns that enterprise poses that I've seen also with other colleagues that actually had a much rougher time than mine also with that. But after that tension, you just want to relax, and plus I was heartbroken, so I stopped writing articles in June last year, and I resumed just this spring instead. Yes, I kept working actually. I was editing my thesis for publishing it for several months up to autumn last year, and I also worked made a little work, just a review, a book review, and some collaboration for but it was really a book. Like, it's just they paid me, handsomely, and interestingly enough, it was just one of my subscribers, one of my followers who offered me this job, and we've been cooperating ever since. But I didn't do anything except videos. So that's how Schwerpunkt made me feel well, and gave me something I could really wrap my mind around, and say could distract me, could make me see a progress going on. Then last autumn I had really a peak of malaise, really, because of this situation, and I've had literally that was anxiety. I think that's what it looks. I found myself at night on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub, panting hard and praying for anxiety to pass, because that's how intense and physical it was. And I had difficulties to fall asleep because my mind would fixate, would higher my heartbeat and all these kind of things. Then there was a peak. There was a moment in which a critical moment that I think is the one that every person who has gone through kind of some sort of trauma or some unclosed issue, let's say, should get through to solve the problem. This is a Jungian problem, a Jungian concept as well. And there is also a hormonal, like yearly speaking, that humans have a hormonal peak in autumn, fundamentally. So every this kind of mental bodily dimension, especially connected to law of attraction, etc., is more intense at that time. That peaked and began to go down. Fortunately, I let out something. I managed to tell that person things that I had kept within, and that I had sent away, because this person would essentially blame me for saying or for pointing out, and get incredibly offended. I don't know what, the pretty peaceful, clear, kind of honest, objective things about how I felt and what was going on, and with the due respect and politeness, not really wanting to accuse the person or anything of bad, really. And after that, I began to finally feel better. I remember I accidentally saw this person was doing at a point after some weeks that I had finally began to sleep better, and I literally had an anxiety cry. I got teary, right? I didn't cry. Yeah, I did cry last year's spring. It was some moment because I was nervous. I didn't know how to vent this. I felt down. I cried some time over the months, to let that out. That does make you feel better, really. And I felt that again. I got teary, and so I didn't know what to do, and I feared I was still fixated. And I must say, very cynically, telling you the truth, that at some point I was shaken by something else. It was the war in Ukraine. I remember I was talking to my mother that asked me for, knowing my interest, like what was going on, what I thought about that. And I said something actually very crude, because, by the way, my parents knew how I felt when I was going through this thing. And I told her something I'm not, proud of, but, when you are in a kind of private context, you're more lax with kind of in terms of reasonable things to say. And I didn't mean it, of course, because I wish that the whole thing had not happened. But I was so dark minded that I said, I hope that this damned war even breaks out, because so that the world will understand kind of the misery of itself, right? Because of how I had felt this person had treated me. And the reason why I said that actually was not a matter of personal revenge, but it was rather because the entire issue I had with that girl stemmed from a historical view, right? This person essentially owns certain ideas that I counter continuously, and even before I knew her, and you know that because you have been listening, at least some of you, to it on Schwerpunkt, and that I found embarrassingly sad, and I never got in thorough detail with a person, let's say, about them, because it seemed to me like offending her, or making her feel like because she would be sensitive to this kind of thing. So I avoided that because I loved her, and I thought, okay, well, there will be time if we wanted to get married, we wanted to have children. That's how serious it was. It wasn't bullshit, right? And there was something about that whole background and the reasons also why we broke up that it's useless to digress on, but that were deeply related to the things I was teaching about the Clausewitzian theory, about military history, the art of war, morality, science, the religious military dimension of existence, and so on. So this I remember last year when I got heartbroken, and say I said, this experience I will, it's as if I didn't get anything out of it, right? It took 4 months beginning to end, and my life was wrecked in that time. And I even, telling the truth, I communicate with lots of girls habitually. So it's not even that I had chosen specifically that one, because again, I had never seen anything like that, and I thought it didn't exist. And the reason why I also fundamentally had at some point even got with my last exit was because I thought, love doesn't really, maybe it starts when you're an adolescent, you fall in love and everything, but there is no such thing. Then you rationalize things, and this event, fortunately enough, or unfortunately, disproved me completely. Because I do believe, I've always believed ever since I was a child, in love, in real love, and this experience proved me not only that I can love again, like Dracula, speaking to his brides, but that there is some broader meaning and purpose that gets properly very well along with the world things I teach. You would be surprised by that. But great part of the Clausewitzian theory, also the Indo-European mythology, etc., does refer to this, right? Even in the same struggle and in the aim. Love, von Clausewitz is not explicit about that, but he knew something about that too. If you study his sentimental life, there was quite strained, and definitely the person didn't go through easier experience that any of us in general, because there were wars going on, right? Trying to marry what eventually would become his wife, but through many difficulties, social divides, political issues, and war specifically. So, as a general, he could be killed at any moment during the Napoleonic Wars that he fought throughout all of, and that brought him to write the greatest work about war in the history of mankind that people still don't read, understand, and think they can just express random opinions on. And the war in Ukraine actually shocked me, because up to some weeks before, I still said, well, it's unlikely this, as many, right? It's unlikely this thing to actually happen, or at least, I was convinced of that. I mean, I wasn't convinced of that. I knew that if there was something going on, evidently. But the sheer incompetence of the Russian government and military and the people in general, it's astonishing. I mean, you just don't invade a country that way. And the reason why I didn't think they would attack is because I perfectly knew what they were doing. I had been studying the thing in detail since the very the thing began, in, at least in detail every day since December, and I already knew it's madness to attack with those forces, with what kind of intelligence information they have to pretend that this is even trying to go like Ukraine is going to crack like nothing, and that the Russians are just marching. And so after in the few weeks before, I began to say, okay, yeah, they will do it, because it was evident, right? Operationally speaking, that's what an army does before the attack. And I was convinced of that. I was convinced of what the Pentagon said. They got every single damn thing right. Every single one, right? They said actually happened. And to me, it was just ridiculous. If it hadn't been just the devastating tragedy that it is. And ever since, I've also been following in detail the World War, and I could easily talk about that. I could easily speak for 2 hours in a row every day about exactly what is happening day by day there. But I decided also not to do it, because I don't think that it could be useful. It would be even interesting and an interesting exercise, but then Schwerpunkt would be transformed into something else. And I also thought, I wouldn't care anything about the political thing, because, as you know, and exactly because I'm a Clausewitzian, a conservative, a right-wing, I overwhelmingly support Ukraine, which was, the average self-satisfied conservative that is not, doesn't have properly any form of cultural intelligence or dignity to even approach, right, the understanding of in the ABCs properly of political dialectics. And this is not a matter of personal opinion. We should stop thinking that people's opinions have any worth if they are bullshit, not because they are from one side or the other, right? This is the thing. I'm, again, right-wing, but I'm not a fascist. I'm right-wing, but I don't self-sabotage my country or whoever's, because, I think I dislike, one, the party that is ruling, and therefore I don't, because I just, I know maybe it's not that modest to say, but I'm a person with kind of broader and especially deeper understanding than the average. That's as far as I can go. Politically, militarily, socially, historically, most people do not know absolutely anything about Ukraine. I mean, I see it even just from popular culture, from people in general. I mean, it's not that people even understand what the Soviet Union was, right? If I talk about Nazi Germany or fascist Italy or Japan, if I talk about communist China, the kids, especially Generation Z, they're lost. They're going to be our next slaves, and they just do not have any cultural point of reference whatsoever, nor from their families, nor from their school. They're gone. They're lost, right? If you want to know how it happens historically, when systems collapse and just oligarchs take over at the end of the day. It's because the common people lack any form of moral resistance. So I'm quite open about my side. Made video pro-Ukraine. I should actually finish that series about Ukrainian history in pills, let's say. But we will also talk about Ukraine at some other point. The general thing, however, being that if I don't talk history on YouTube, in a wider sense, I presume that I will never set the methodological and also, generally speaking, moral and scientific example of what it means to understand the whole rather than just a single thing. So turning Schwerpunkt just into a chronicle of the Ukrainian war, doesn't matter how important it is in general, historically, etc., is it's too limiting, right? And yes, I feel bad about the fact that I could say much more about it and explaining the reason. In fact, I thought to start a series about paradoxically Russian history, or at least the history of the Russian Empire, and Soviet Union, also to explain properly the causes of this dramatic cultural underdevelopment. Why and how is it? Was it even possible for such things to exist historically, and what kind of complete amnesia and in fact lack of any historical awareness exists nowadays. I mean, if you think that something like the Soviet Union existed, you even wonder whether humanity is worth existing in a sense. I mean, the sheer incompetence and failure and properly stupid incompetence and evil, because that's the point. It's not even about, you can be evil and efficient, right? And then it's kind of worse by certain standards. But when you still kill people just out of the sheer civilizational underdevelopment, and you still pretend this to have been anything positive, and you don't even have that normal political awareness in realizing that you cannot gnostically separate, I don't know, this thing was good after all. Like, this is done also with the Nazis, with the fascists, this, it was kind of bad, but also if you look at the other perspective, no, there is no perspective. We live in single entities that do specific things, and they do both things at a time, exactly because what they are. And they are systems that fail miserably, clamorously, in ways that would scare, and did scare, and at the time, for those people who really knew what it was, everyone, right? And would still cause problems like the ones that we see today, and that we don't practically care about anymore, because the average idiot just is glued to a phone and reads the news 1 hour, and 1 hour after has already forgotten that. There is this thing in the back of your mind that says, well, okay, well, but as soon as I feel okay now here, it's fine. Then maybe, there will be massive issues worldwide. My entire society will be strained. Politics will be a mess. Well, that doesn't matter. I will deal with that later. But for now, right, this narrowing down, this shrinking of any moral force and, intelligence and capacity and in fact personal worth, right, is shrinking dramatically. Most people that live in the world today are fundamentally this. And I don't think they should have, again, the same rights like others. I believe there should be a patent to, especially allowing vote for specific, also for specific issues. It can't be core issues. You can't leave some decisional capacity, but we should stop pretending. We don't live in an age anymore in which people are properly deprived of their own rights. It's the system that is getting bogged down by these same people, right? So if we cannot stop the consequences physically because there is a broader let's say, entropy that makes the thing decay, and we still have to begin absorbing the hardest losses caused by these people's incompetence. Let's say we cannot afford properly anymore to say, well, okay, we will attribute this person an ideal, full potential in terms of voting, but because it's useless. They don't know what to do with that. It's like giving, again, a car license to a person that can't drive. They say, okay, well, let's do it. And that's what I think it means to be a conservative. I mean, to be harsher, simply to evidence reality for what it is and not for what just it should be, right? It's a very it's actually even an anti-idealist concept, because it must face reality also for what it is. And these people would always have the capacity, the very easy one, to have a satisfactory schooling level that to allow them to vote, right? It wouldn't be like, if you're not a billionaire, you can't vote. No, it wouldn't be like that. It would be just, if you don't know even where your country is on a world map, you can't vote. I mean, it's that obvious, right? And there is no reason for which you cannot afford to know that. It's your fault. And if you brought yourself to that kind of personal squalor, you will have to pay for it, because you are creating actual losses to the rest of the community that has to pay for your cultural underdevelopment. And frankly, I would do better without you, right? So since we cannot kill you, we cannot expel you forcibly, you just will at least stop deciding things you don't know anything about. Because that's where it gets down to. It's not antipathy. It's not because, what you look like or what you do. It could be anyone, right? I'm favorable to kind of broader, it's not even a political thing, right? That's not just the main indicator. It's really about the person's core moral force and capacity that determines everything, right? And this is, in my opinion, the most important thing. And so, oddly enough, I managed to kind of come out of that hellish situation. I began to calm down before sleep and sleeping better. That's really a big deal for me. I must sleep that 8 hours. If I sleep those 8 hours in a row, I am full of energy, well rested. I work all the day long. Right, as a way, from the moment I wake up to the when I go to bed again, I'm always up to something concrete. Right, I'm not there wasting time. I don't tolerate that. I can't afford that. It's just not me, and that's why I don't tolerate it in other people as well. In terms of moral standards, and so maybe it was spring. It was, I got distracted a little bit. I felt more confident. I came back a little bit to lots of things that, even just conceiving my life, because it's as if, I don't know how you see the past, even in your own life. But to me, it's a sort of periods, of phases, right? Of even of cycles from a certain point of view. There's some peaks, ups and downs. There are certain moments, atmosphere, mostly, are made also kind of mentally to remember more kind of the most intense emotional moments, right? And so those that leave as a consequence of a more powerful trace, and we tend to scan kind of our life through mostly. And so I had to be aware that I was not the same person anymore. And I finally began to realize, which was a path that started since the beginning actually, that this experience actually began to it pushed me, because this is the problem. It's not a passive influence that it gets on you and then you suddenly get. No, you have to work. You have to reach that critical moment where I thought, like, here I'm not coming out of this because I can't sleep, I can't work, I feel like shit, I feel pain in my eyes, in my head all the time, I have the heart pumping like crazy, I feel destroyed all the time, like I'm letting go easily, right? And then you have to sort out what this whole thing is, because you're confronted by life about what you do not solve. Your problems, you can't bury them under the carpet. They're always going to pop out, and bigger and more problematic, in fact, than they would be. They would have been if solved since the beginning. And so I began to realize that it takes an effort. You have to work, right? You cannot, in fact, sit here and pretend to know history just because you listen to my own content or whoever's, saying this is an attitude we had with history. History is about working hard, making a big effort that nobody will even properly pay you back for, that you have to do it for you. Today, instead, we live in a world where everybody thinks they're entitled to something, right? That's why I despise both left and right, even though I'm right myself, because their average is just made up of someone who believes they are special just because they exist. They don't hope to do anything. They just claim something that is just like a sort of spell that they think that makes them sound as they are. They don't do anything. They just want from other people. And the reason is that they are lesser people and they should be discriminated against as such by the others, because you will not make them develop if you keep spoiling them, if you keep serving them, if you keep, you don't negotiate with terrorists. You don't give a whining child what he wants. And because of that, you have to teach people in the old, harsh, good ways that it doesn't matter whoever you are. If you don't do something that makes you worth way beyond average than others, you are basically most likely useless for the rest of the world, because the world is mostly put in motion by this collective effort, but in terms of individual merit and actual competence, the world is ruled by a very few people that make the entire thing work. The others are just living parasitically by consuming that. And this is true, believe me, also for right-wing, especially for alt-righters, for people that, again, essentially cannot afford any individual force anymore, but diluting themselves into a collectivistic group, right? As you know, I'm quite open about this. I think that alt-righters are socialists, and they are, as national socialists, and that's the actual thing. And yes, whoever tells you that the Nazis, no, we're not real socialists, because you see, they were national socialists, were Nazis, actually, it's all a scam, right? No, they were actual socialists. I will make videos about this, right? It's not even about, you can't say, again, as before, you separate economics from politics. That's socialistic bullshit, right? And that's why you keep believing that, and that's the reason why we have been fucked up in the head much more than heartbreaks, by just the fact that we don't even use words anymore with knowing their actual meaning, their etymologies, their historical background, and so on, right? I decided that after all, whatever happens in my life, I have to cope with by myself. That even the harshest things, as unpleasant as they make you feel, as hard as they feel, really, they can destroy you. They make you feel less. They make you feel, you failed, etc. But that's exactly the fuel that is necessary to improve, right? And in this last year, at the end of the day, I did improve, and I improved in ways that maybe are not so evident right now, maybe to you, but I can feel from the within that I got closer to some broader existential problems. And I finally sorted out lots of things that, even given my previous studies, had not really known. That's why I've gotten more into mythology, in the history of religions, and I began actually to build up what again, just because it was already going on. This thing started as early as Schwerpunkt did in the first place, but it keeps expanding, right? It's this powerful idea of a morally and scientifically driven hierarchy that struggles in order to maintain control, and the more powerful it becomes, and the more force it requires. So it's it's all about that. It's about that self-sacrifice to take on literally your cross and fighting against the greatest odds, even to the point of self-annihilation in a sense, because if you don't do that, you cannot improve, you cannot grow, right? And history, in my opinion, shows exclusively this at the end of the day, what we can't carve from it. Of course, I will not transform this video into kind of Schwerpunkt philosophy of history, which would be interesting, but let's say in part it would be useless, because I see from the videos that you fundamentally don't follow much this aspect, even when I make it very clear, and so I doubt that this video would be more or less effective if I digressed on such issues. But let's say that I have clarified also lots of strictly history of religion aspects that I had never really thought before, and I presume that this did stem from the crisis. It did stem from, okay, let's not just be secure about what we think, but let's struggle again. Let's see, let's push our limits further and see how far we can go, because at the end of the day we will never get the full answer, but we can always improve, and there is only one direction that is the right one if you believe in the truth and you're not a moral relativist, which history debunks dramatically as an attitude and properly as a way of living. But it's become the regular standpoint from which just look at all the rubbish that is made on YouTube in terms of it's not even because they are poorly made videos technically, it's just the premises, right? Not even the clickbait per se, but just properly the misconception that lays behind certain problems that are designed just for getting views for dumber and dumber people, for people that don't know history less and less, right? In a formal way, in a way that has in fact an order. There's not as much, right? Cancel from your mindset to be able just to read or to watch videos, etc., and knowing things. It doesn't work like that. Again, if you don't study, if you don't increase that quality level of understanding, you will not reach it. You can even do it for a lifetime. You will not reach it. You will always remain below. I've met countless people working like this, and it's basically the general human attitude to existence at this point. That's why the concept of sacred and universal tradition that I always resume actually is crucial to this whole point, because it's what and the reason why people were aware before of such dimension that reveals how far they were compared to us right now. And it's even a concept that most people today don't understand. They always feel hurt about the idea of, no, in the past people were not more intelligent. I mean, they actually were. It's just that you're just wrong about what it means to be intelligent. Because you're not intelligent, surprise, surprise. And I deeply believe in this. The more I learn history, again, no other thing essentially built this conviction up so clearly and unequivocally like learning history, and I didn't even plan that. It's simply something I discovered along the way because I did, and I kept working at some level with history like this. But this sounds just like the premise of the video. As I was saying, I feel better. Like, I feel kind of older. I've been even physically shattered by this. I am resuming also some consistent physical activity that I couldn't do because I was exhausted all the time. I'm getting back in. I've always been in shape, let's say, but I like to be also some sort of athletically developed, and the thing matters. Also for my same mental development. So I'm coming back. I feel tired. A bit. Like, I feel I have gone through this thing and it has shocked me like nothing else. But again, this shock gave me some other energy that I'm resuming and that I'm probably going to put in most of the things I'm doing right now with my publications, with Schwerpunkt and other activities. And this is why I decided 1 year after one particular moment that I will quickly come to now to explain, to address such journey, right? I feel better now. I feel healed, also in the head. I still think a lot about what happened, and again, it's normal, right? It's what you're meant to do. It's a sort of duty, as a matter of fact, because you should explain what happened and not, again, being honest about what were your mistakes, what are the other person's mistakes, and always judging, because that's another point of history. History is useless without judgment, right? Our ideological problems cannot be solved, right? Especially the connection between knowledge and action, right? And determination, in a way, cannot be solved. But through this, it's a gamble, and that's why it fits perfectly well the character, the second person, let's say, of the Clausewitzian Trinity. It's always a gamble, but there is no other way, right, to eventually improve, because struggling and positively knowing where you're going, you're heading to, is, of course, always endowed with a certain degree of positivity, and you know what you're doing, etc. But you will also fail along the way, and those failures, paradoxically, are, as Popper also said, etc., scientifically speaking, they are actually the most important moment. The most important moment scientifically is not actually demonstrating something, but it's failing, because failure is much more certain than demonstration, because demonstration could demonstrate something that you have not yet fully understood, really, or that you may, it's like in history, it's very frequent, like you think you have discovered something, but then you realize that it's always beyond, and that this thing expands always, and requires an ever greater research, etc. The point, though, is that the quality of your thought increases dramatically, but you have to be able to judge, you have to be able to assess, because in the lack of truth, by its fullest extent, the only way not to remain paralyzed and inactive is to actually take that risk and judge and express it and speaking your mind and articulating it, so that you can give really a form to it. Very often we think we know things, and that's the illusion, because we just know something that eventually is imperfect. We will that it is imperfect already, but that will eventually decay, right? And until you don't fix in a form, in a concept, in a symbol, and in the value that it has, you cannot fundamentally have an improve. You cannot really use it to an extent. You will remain like a larva. You will remain in the shell, underdeveloped, and sitting there doing really nothing. So over the last year, first of all, okay, let's start really from zero here, because I'm not sure. I see it from the comments that you don't know really where I come from with this, what I'm doing this for. I will explain why I'm doing Schwerpunkt. I will probably make other videos, and we will have to get a bit more in. You understand here, it's the exercise that counts, first of all. But there are deeper reasons, deeper motivations at least. I got this 1,200 subscribers in the last year. You would think it's few, given the amount of videos that I made. But some of you will remember that last year, exactly on this day, if I'm not wrong, or around these days, after having monetized the channel, I was fundamentally raptured by a sense of guilt concerning the fact that it was using essentially copyrighted images, right? That's what essentially, I picked random pictures from the internet, and I blurred them, and I used them in kind of a not very exploitative way, definitely, and at some point they were also not very cool to look, but there were certain specific images that also about certain, I don't know, certain units, types, etc. that are very difficult to find in a let's say commercially available fashion, right? You realize probably since then that I have, at the end of the videos, at least for when I use this copyrighted images, the Creative Commons licenses to say, look, I'm using these images and those are free to use also for commercial purpose. Well, I didn't used to do that. I made more than 1,100 videos without that. Fortunately, most of those videos were also or not really most of them. I had to re-upload, like in theory, the ones with copyrighted images up to 800. So I said, look, because I never received any copyright strike. I mean, even the authors of the images would never do it to you, right? But still, since the videos are many, you don't really know, you can't really predict moral forces and what's going to be in people's heads. You know what, it would be very easy to strike me and to tear the channel down if somebody, had seen that I used copyright content, etc. So in order to avoid that, I took this decision and said, I never got any copyright strike. Nobody ever complained. Somebody even told me, yeah, you can use my copyrighted images for that purpose, etc. But I decided to blur the videos. And I blurred 800 videos. The others were not to be blurred because, like this one, for example, they use a completely copyright-free image, so I didn't need... I had made the, the Von Krieger series that were over... And other videos with just this image, or sometimes even with actually copyright-free images, especially the early ones where there was just one picture, for example, and I didn't need to re-upload, right? And so I did this, and I not only, but I began to re-upload the videos with Creative Commons licenses. Now, it was a necessity. Right. The problem at the time was which kind of strategy I had to use. So it was a necessity because finally I have a channel that I know doesn't risk being taken down for any copyright issue. Of course, YouTube is weird. Sometimes they make mistakes, etc. But if they do, if you write them, you say, look, this was my channel. For some strange reason, I don't know, there was a guy dressed up in some rags that was shouting, and they took down his channel for terrorism because they thought he was kind of mimicking an Islamic terrorist. So this kind of bullshit. I don't know whether they have algorithms, etc. I think for the pictures especially they don't. Like most of YouTube copyright issues, as you know, occur because of the audio tracks, and for those they have a pretty sophisticated mean to say that everything that you take that is not let's say that matches another audio is uploaded on YouTube cannot be monetized. For example, I uploaded was Eisenhower's The Day speech last June the 6th, made a video that is completely copyright free. But since there are other videos on YouTube with that thing, YouTube told me, look, this is they call them basically doesn't happen anything. Like it's a warning, but it's not like a cumulative thing after one that they shut it down. They just tell you basically we have other videos here with that track, so you're basically somebody that uploaded the saying, yeah, okay, but it's copyright free, so it's not an issue. You can have thousands of old, maybe even old videos with that kind of warning, nothing happens. But the copyright strikes are serious instead. Again, I had never had that problem, but it was the only way to avoid it. And so you've seen, especially last year, I began to re-upload videos like crazy, right? I think in the first days I re-uploaded 5 to 6 videos a day. It was insane, right? And the reason why I could do that is because, again, I had finished my doctorate. I was heartbroken and destroyed. I said, fuck this. I will live like a freaking animal, but I will manage to get this channel back on track, because the first concern of mine was, of course, the views and the watch length, right? That is basically mostly that would how you measure the channel's shape, in many ways. And I could have, but let's say I wouldn't predict at that moment what would have happened through this re-uploads. Well, to make the long story short, I didn't lose subscribers at all. Those have kept rising at a lower rate, as we'll see now, but still, last year I had gotten to important levels. I think I had 4,400 hours of visualization per month and something like 24,400 views per month, in fact, and almost 200 subscribers per month, right? And what occurred in the first couple of months, I began to do this every day, is that I successfully re-uploaded, I think since last year, more than 400 videos, so more than a half once I should have re-uploaded. And in fact now I think I have not even 400 to re-upload really, but I've gotten kind of lazy. And I will also tell you, because there is a specifically strategic issue here. I realized something that I wouldn't think, but it was kind of necessary if I wanted to re-upload, that of course, having basically eliminated the older videos, re-uploaded just new ones, this had lost all the watch length, all the likes, all the comments, etc., which did make for that algorithmic view. The algorithmic view means that YouTube basically injects in the circle your own videos on the base of those stats, right? So up to that point, I had never I had always been uploading videos for years already, and I had never understood how the algorithm concretely worked, right? And I thought that I knew I would have had a drop in views and something, but I thought it would have been mild. Instead, I realized that, again, I basically, I have the stats here actually. I basically halved at some point both my views and watch length, and this was, it happened suddenly. Here I see it's exactly, yes, from actually up to mid-September, I had a very high amount of views. Then gradually here I arrived to December. I think I lost almost a half. We were okay, maybe not really that. I think I had lost 1/3, but it was still importantly enough, because in all this you have to account that the subscribers, albeit at a lower rate because of the lower traffic, had kept increasing. The subscribers do not go down, because there are people that just pass by and very often just do not even watch your content. They just bookmark your channel and say, okay, well, this probably, if it makes an interesting video, will get in my feed and I will watch it on that base, but otherwise they don't watch. But however, they keep accumulating. So what I noticed over time is that the algorithmic base, so what would be like the video injected by YouTube in the normal searches engine system, whatever. It's a very complicated thing. Nobody really, of course, knows how it works, because YouTube doesn't reveal it. It's just like Coca-Cola, right? There's the secret recipe of it. But it's actually a mix of all. Like I've checked, I've had this somewhat unique experience. I could even make a video for others. Our YouTubers usually are obsessed by these things, and I can explain the thing pretty accurately without making those kind of just paste and copy videos from Wikipedia, from forums that do not really explain anything, like clickbait. But I'm becoming shrewd in these things now, and I realized that just right now, like even right now, I have a pretty low algorithmic base. Actually, it's been coming back. Like the lowest has been in March. Since March, the trend has reversed. It's kept increasing, especially in visualization time. I basically got almost to to last year's levels, right? Whereas the views instead are still less, at least systemically, but we're almost there. In all this, also because I have lots more subscribers. Last year I had 4,400, now I have almost 6,000, and I managed to fidelize you. The interesting thing about Schwerpunkt is that most people don't know I'm out there. Sometimes people subscribe and say, oh my god, you have so many stuff, I didn't know you were here. Why? Right? Because you just subscribe to strange things, or you do not search, you want to be fan. And I see this in the channel. People subscribe, they don't watch, right? Also, they forget, nor also very often they watch the older videos. Like if you want to know, like I make a very specific kind of content, you understand. If you like it, I have, again, almost 1,500 videos that you can watch. Why don't you go back and watch those as well? Because I realize from the stats is that most people just get the notification and make a video. They just presume I'm going to stay here forever, I make videos, and there is no need to go watch the old ones. Some people ask, can you make a video about this, about that? And I always post like 2 or 3 videos video link that I already made on the topic and said, look, there is a playlist, because I realize, again, people want everything readily, served like in a fast food. They don't want to make any freaking effort. Just dig into my channel. I have, at this point, hundreds of playlists of different specific topics for everybody's tastes, for anybody's interests, etc. And instead, but this was true also at the beginning, when the algorithm worked, for example, people really watch just certain videos, right? And it was already like that last year. Like I had, I don't know, 30 videos, over 1,100 that were algorithmic. They were in the cycle, they were watched, and the others, like, they would get some view because people eventually interact through the algorithmic videos also with the other ones, etc. But mostly was about those videos, that some of which I didn't even have to re-upload because they were some of the older ones, and not really just because they were older they had more views. It's just for some reason they got more views, and they're still there. They are lame, they're bad, they are from 2018, 2019 when I spoke, much worse than today. There's just one picture, they're lame, bad, and people watch them all the freaking time. And not only, but most of these people, some of them subscribe, but they have zero idea that I have 1,500 videos out there. So that's why the best thing, and the interesting thing also is that my videos have a very high watch length for YouTube, right? Even the income I make is very high for 6,000 subscribers, because my videos are watched, because they are objectively, I don't want to flatter myself too much, but believe me, it doesn't take to make a more insightful historical video than YouTube's average. And of course, people who are really interested tend to watch them more, better. They're longer also, so yes, of course, they will presumably maintain kind of, you listen to me speaking, and so you want to know where I get to the point. And so they are interested, because also provide with actual information. I provide with actual, that, if you're a regular follower, what I do here. So it's been a struggle, but I must say that I think new videos are becoming algorithmic. I managed to rise pretty fast. Right now, I see it from the views that are increasing monthly, on a regular basis, and it's for this reason, and I will make another video soon, that I think this autumn will be crucial for Schwerpunkt. As I see there's been, again, this coming back, and I plan also to make very kind of, intense videos, and some that will really, make an impact, like some that I've already made, but, in more consistent kind of serial way. I have plenty of content to make. So last year, again, I began to re-upload these videos, and again, I had nothing to do. I felt sick. I remained home all the time. I had these mental issues, physical issues, and I just kept going. This thing saved me, right? I remember last year when I suspended all the videos for a while because I had to blur them. There was one guy said, "Oh my God, what happened to you? Did you have a mental breakdown?" Right? And I would have, no, I didn't have a mental breakdown. I was just, strategically re-uploading the videos. I had a mental breakdown because of what had happened to me sentimentally, let's say. But I am that type of guy. Like, when I choose something, I go there with full energy. I'm terribly high in consciousness, so everything I do wrong I need to fix, because otherwise I feel like, and so I did it, right? I re-uploaded like hundreds of videos by making new ones every day. So it was insane, and I probably exhausted myself in the process. Also, the fact that the views went down, I confess, yes, there is some, serotonin probably, or dopamine, I don't know what, kicking in when I see that, a video, grows, and, there is some sort of, positive end to what you're doing. And of course, I want Schwerpunkt to get somewhere. So the general moodiness between heartbreak, illnesses, tragedies, war, etc., low YouTube views, like the whole cosmic dimension of my existence being brought down, and ironically. And finally, however, I managed to go back on track at many levels, and I think that I'm really gaining steam again, still at every level, and this thing is going somewhere that can be really profitable for everyone. Up to were there any changes, right, for the of content from last year? Well, actually, yes, and some are also for the older followers pretty evident. So every year Schwerpunkt has been different, right? The first year I made videos just episodically, every once in a while. Then I began to make them periodically, every day, like in 2019. In 2020 they improved, and they also got a bit shorter than the usual ones that were kind of just rambles I make, still like this one, but still, it took me a lot to speak in the first place, so that were boring. Now I'm at least faster and somewhat more intelligible. Then in 2021 there's been this thing, and honestly, I don't remember. I think the Klaus... about last year, I stopped making von Clausewitz videos. Many of you subscribed to this channel without essentially knowing, also given that at the time I had, like, I think 2/3 the subscribers I have now already when I stopped the Clausewitzian thing. Ignored what this channel is, right? Some of you come on this channel, they look at von Clausewitz, they just think, this guy, he wants to be, he's German, he has this Prussian officer there, and so that's kind of our conservative guy. They haven't understood anything at many levels, but especially they haven't watched anything of the Funkriege. That is the single most important content that I uploaded, but that I stopped. I arrived to at 3/4 of the Funkriege, commenting, like reading and commenting all the paragraphs, and I will have to finish it. In fact, I was promising myself to restart it again. If it hadn't been that those videos got a very low amount of views, and so I'm not entirely sure whether you would follow them, etc. And it's more a matter of habit. Last year also, dear mentor and very esteemed professor, not of my university, it's a very long story, probably one day I will say it, but a great part of the reason why I got here, say, not the channel, maybe I would have done it too, but why this thing is dedicated to von Clausewitz, and why I care so much about strategic culture and education and the broader civic meaning of it, I owe to him. He died suddenly, right? He was a neighbor. He was I had met him once in person. There was a group where we talked about military. He's probably the best in the world. I'm not exaggerating. You can, everything I say, I think it's true, right? Or at least, I think it's real for how it was to me, and I'm pretty confident that was the case. He was very misunderstood. I understand him a lot because sometimes I had to explain the same things, and I realized that the audience is sometimes not really there, or I have terrific followers and supporters and fans, and I want to thank them all because 6,000 is, I didn't get there yet, but if stop thinking about it. First of all, I know some people specifically that I am affectionated to, some friends, some people I've cooperated with have sent me gifts. The Schwerpunkt really did allow me to do a lot of interesting things. But let's say the broader mass, even of the affectionate ones, and also those who do not that watch without being subscribers that I can't hear, I don't know. I doubt get so many things about this channel, and this is not about the single contents, etc. Now we will see, because I think that this channel is watched just for the migration era Germanic history videos, and that's something very sad, frankly, and very disappointing. And we all know the ugly reason behind it, frankly. Not because I love that history, I also, studied it thoroughly and importantly, but, there is so much else and so much more. And again, that reflects the kind of narrow-mindedness and actual historical incompetence for which just the simplest thing, or the ethno-nationalist aspect, that I don't condone or support at all, because those peoples had a completely and diametrically opposed idea of that. They had an individualistic, hyper idealistic, elitistic behavior that would make them spit in the face to all those people who claim, those were my ancestors. So I'm like, no, you're just a dirty statalist collectivist, an ethno-nationalist, and frankly a racist. And that has nothing to do with what those people that were even much more ferocious than racist, but for the good reasons, not for the bullshit that you pretend them to be. Really means. I see very often, you see, who are these ethno-nationalists? Sometimes I see the profiles randomly on Twitter when you subscribe. You think they are, 6 foot 3 guys that, lift several kilos, tens of kilos of weight, and, are hyper chad, violent, confident. They are kids that post girls from anime, and wear the Russian flag on their profile because they hate Biden, and they think that that's an intelligent thing to do, right? Not because I like Biden at all, but because they associate the two things, and you understand that's the Z generation without that. They are completely lost to slavery, fortunately, in a sense, because they deserve that. But they are. I don't want to be sexist, but there's the P word. Those are the kind of that you would think this terrible astronauts. They are weak, the most involutive and most involved masculine types you can find. And these are self-hating them, so they're self-sabotaging their own civilization that they have not the palest idea of anymore, because they're also contributing to destroy. They hate themselves. They hate things they don't understand. They're not competent politically, historically, military, socially, culturally, educationally, morally, scientifically, zero. But they have to subscribe to your channel. It's about the migration. It's about the concept of the barbarian that smashes things that attracts them, plus the white supremacist obsession. But it's fundamentally that, right? And if you tell them something about, I don't know, late medieval Germany, something much more, it's still about Germany, because, they think Germany is, whatever, the best has ever happened in history for some reason. And they say it in their profiles. They don't follow, because they don't understand late medieval civilization. It's too complex. It's too difficult. It's too... it requires too much intelligence. They don't see it. They have to think about their own narrow, dumb version of the migration era. Absolutely, untrue. And again, that they have a dramatically harsh, conservative, kind of aristocratic, theological ethos to my content that completely obliterates that nationalistic, socialistic, statalistic, collectivistic bullshit they buy. And even if they are against, especially, most of my audience is American, so these people happen to be mostly American conservatives or ultra conservative, whatever they're not actually conservatives. So they have normally the anti-statal centralization bias as well, but they're actually statalists themselves, even if they don't know that, because they reason through mental patterns that have been taught them by Marxists to think about, modern contemporary countries in that context, and they don't even understand what that even means. So it's just an embarrassment, right? There are many other ethno-nationalists. Some come here like this, they think that since I make Germanic history videos, first of all, the weird thing, right? Even you see about history, that there is nothing easier than understanding somebody political background and more cultural background from historical statements. I am a military historian. I make lots of medieval warfare videos, and covering area, as you know, basically all Eurasia, the Mediterranean, etc. There are these people that arrive from some kind of, usually at least, not because I particularly have, yes, I do have a bias towards these backgrounds as well, the He-Mayas, the reenactors, but let's say mostly those, and I've always thought that those are a net of racists for some reason, because in my experience it was the case, right? And again, that's mostly about obsessed about the migration of the possible videos that they can watch. It's about, again, there are just some, say, Germanic history videos are 1/10. They watch exclusively those, right? These are people that come every once in a while, new. They say, oh, wow, this channel is so cool and technical, because they get the fact that at least I have a doctorate in medieval warfare. And I see they watch exclusively those. If they're not Germanic, they don't watch it. Like, if it's French, they don't watch it. If it's Polish, they don't watch it. If it's whatever, right? They don't watch it. They just watch that. They start making, sometimes even regarding tactics or, military culture, some sensible topics, just because they are the ABC that they read on books that they use for basics for starting, HEMA and those kind of things. Then they immediately, at the end of the day, they stop around the third, fourth video, during which they usually also say some bullshit regarding, hating, I don't know, the Romans, for example, or expressing some other strange fictional historical, idea of what they think, of course, of something that they have never studied because they don't know anything about history, as a matter of fact. And if they're openly bitchy about that, I blocked just a couple of them, telling you the truth, but there are many. Every once in a while, all behaving the same identical way, but they see that I don't respond mostly, and so they get away, right? Because they're not going to make an effort. They're not going to understand the broader picture, like understanding that specific, even Germanic history. My explanation stems from a broader, complex vision of the art of war, having studied in detail for more than a decade the actual thing in many countries at a time, and constantly doing this. No, it has to be about that thing. It's as if they see a flag, a color, a mold that for them is what they also allegedly fit. Like, the worst are the ones I come from. I won't say usually, but again, it's mostly those. I come from this country. What the fuck cares what country you come from? What the hell has to do with the video? Like, I care where you come from in general, meaning that I think it's beautiful that, I have all this audience around the world, mostly North Americans. I stream from Europe, etc. But I like that. Say, you can't say where you come from, but let's say, I come from this country. This video is amazing. What the fuck cares that you come from the country that the video talks about, right? As if it were just, like, it's not that they say it en passant. They say it like, I come from this country, so I'm qualified. You're really not, right? First of all, like, it's not that they first of all come from countries like, the top ones, right? That they could say, they're mostly coming from larger kind of frustrated countries that pretend to be maybe part of that legacy, but actually do not even have a high quality of life to even presume they have. I don't know, that there is some accomplishment in them, right? Yeah, I never meet like a Dutch or a Norwegian. Okay, there are also less people, but at least you can demographically. Or the UK. Now, it's always, I come from this specific country, which, and who the fuck cares that you come from that country, right? The top ones do not care, right? The top countries are not frustrated about themselves, right? Some have to give you this introduction card. I come from this country. Who the fuck cares where you come from? What, do you think that I'm celebrating your country just because I'm covering its history? Then you're dumb, right? I'm not celebrating your country. I'm, yes, kind of generally speaking, telling history by not drawing and saying, these were good or bad guys. I'm just saying, this is it, and it's beautiful because countries do exist, they have a history, etc. But when you start understanding that these attitudes are associated with always kind of a tale even of an animal-like analogy, of some sort of suprematism, either on a racial or nationalistic base, that goes against blatantly, by the way, all the content that I've done, because again, my content is hierarchically, it's like just a big feudal hierarchy, right? Everything revolves around the sacred universal principle, right? And if you think that you can extrapolate gnostically that thing because it's your country in contemporary history, and pretending, it's the only thing you watch, right? Or you pretend that you descend just from that country, even though, I don't know if you've ever seen a genetic section of an average European. What's in it, right? But no, it has to be that ethnicity, that thing, because for some reason you have idealized it somewhere. Everything becomes only about that, and the rest does not exist. That's a form of cultural underdevelopment. That's a form of narrow-mindedness. That's a form of, you can't go beyond a certain quality. And frankly, the comments of those people actually demonstrated pretty well, right? Because they say incredibly stupid things that make you understand that, if they had actually watched my entire content, which is something for which every single thing I make is actually in function to, because you can't think to just pick one video of mine and listen to it. I mean, it's generally enough, you can do that, but you will have missed the entire point. Also because there's plenty of references, right? You cannot understand the same content. This is not entertaining content. It's not meant to flatter you. It's not meant to give you any, it's meant actually to trigger you, to challenge you, to make you see things in ways that, to even hate me at a level, but to make you grow as a person, right? It's not to comfort your own weakness, right? And that's why I use this language, because I'm highlighting what you perfectly know, right? I don't talk for anyone, of course. I've met some brilliant minds here, some that understood even the von Krieg in an incredibly deep way and quickly speaking. So I don't have any specific... I just know every day that when I upload stuff here to read the comments, that there is going to be that bias that makes for 30% of the comments that I get, and behind which you can look at the fact, by the way, that these people are kind of hiding their true ideas, right? Because it's not that I admonish more than much against ethno-nationalism. I mean, I do it every time it's useful. I speak against racism as much as communism, socialism, fascism, all this garbage, right? And I'm very happy of doing so. Because I haven't seen anyone coming here making a comment saying, "Oh, no, you're wrong because this and that," and explaining a cogent, an historiographical reason why, in the philosophy of history, I'm wrong with the evidence and that. No, you understand that just at some point you piss somebody off, and these people make passive-aggressive monosyllabical comments and unsubscribe. Right, that's the reaction. Just think about, what kind of power these people have in general. And I've been structuring my channel, and I knew this since the beginning, actually, because I obviously make somewhat conservative content, but I do it also on the base of evidence, right? I don't invent history or I have a specific agenda. Like I do just because I see the world this way, but I evidence the reason, right? I think that there is a specific universal dimension to the things that I'm talking about that the other doesn't quite get, and that this is reflected by very specific historical and kind of in the present world as well. So these things I haven't explained thoroughly, maybe structurally, rather, for you to be fully aware of what, my position and whatever. But you can't get them if you in fact follow the entire content, which again is pretty oddly undone, right? But again, as this channel grows, there will be probably also a greater understanding of that, and so I have to make a bit of cleansing sometimes. And again, the impression is that they're all kids, right? I've never met like an adult that even had anything against what I had to say, even if he disagreed, because he understood that I had a point and that my content is somewhat more intelligent than the average, and that in order to attack me, you have at least to spend a lot of energies that, frankly, you cannot afford to, and I wouldn't even advise you to spend, because, if I say something, it's because I've been thinking about it well, believe me, right? It's not because I am whatever, a PhD, or I just do this from years or whatever. It's just that, I get to that universal core, to points that are very difficult to even sometimes understand for someone in order to attack. In fact, most of I don't get much criticism at all, right? I thought when I started this channel, I thought, everybody will attack me and start talking about history, countries, peoples that will eat me alive. On the contrary, I get an overwhelmingly positive reaction, And the only criticism I get is basically irrelevant. It's inconsistent. It doesn't even start to criticize the content. It doesn't do anything in that sense. And it mostly, I don't know, I know that on the internet it's also easy to be pissed off, to have strong emotional reactions. But fundamentally, I do sense like actually a very pitiful dynamic that is, lots of people follow me because they hope that I'm on their side. Like that's the kind of thing I get. It's not that I meet with, as I was saying before, rampant, I don't know, ideologues that I've been kicking out some communists as well, right? It's not, but there are disciplined communists, right? They just listen, they're not, but they want to know what I think. They don't waste time, even because it would be wasting time, kind of criticizing negatively, right? And trying to, but not seeing that this content for its average quality is just, great to have out there. I think today, in perspective, in spite of my very poor linguistical skills and communicational skills in general, and also the pretty primitive video making, etc. But I think there is a broader point that glues together, in fact, both actually liberal and conservative followers, right? I don't have a specific hostility toward, objectively, I do have personally towards liberals in general, because I think they are, the premises on which they base their ideology are wrong. But I know many liberals in my life that are good people, and they may be dumb at that level, but let's say if they were just that, sometimes we would be in a better world. The problem is that the average, both on liberal and conservative, are dramatically lower, right? So it's a huge issue, right? The scale of intolerance that I can display depends, of course, on the higher the values we're attaching. And so that's why it can be so caustic and vitriol-like, as I've said. But it's that I'm not really like that. I do have this kind of, almost, in fact, aggressive, actually, and even, ambitious and kind of pretty heartless sometimes way of behaving when I get to, what I want. But for the rest, you realize I'm kind of, I'm a tranquil person. Like, I'm rather sensitive. I have my own, I like tranquility, stability, and I'm not doing more than this, right? I try to discipline myself every day to channel my strength, my capacity in something productive, but I don't, let's say, I don't bite more than that. Of course, I wouldn't have any problem to shoot a person that enters my house, like a thief or something. That's perfectly normal to me. That would perfectly fit my hierarchical purposes. I can be dramatically cold-blooded, and I can use also violence to strike, in also especially preemptively, and or at least with a deterrent aim, pretty effectively, as some people found out. But I'm not, again, the person who gets into quarrel, again, because I'm able to prevent that, so I don't have some strange kind of brawls past record, I don't know. No, I'm just okay. And that's why I think this channel, at the end of the day, gets to the point, because it makes order by a certain degree. So up to that year, I began making close-edits and videos that are basically the ones without which you can't really have a strategic culture and education. I talk about warfare, and I realize very often people are less interested about that. Like, before last year, there was more military historical ethos attached to not much my channel per se, but to my audience, right? People came here because I was kind of the military historical expert. Since last year, when I stopped making the Filmkriege, and I also, as we'll explain now, begin to make kind of more manual-based topics and kind of more basic history. Of course, I began to attract more kind of, say, an audience that mostly thinks I'm here because I'm a medievalist or a historian in general. what happened last year is also that, you see, I have some cycles within my content that can last even more than 1 month. Some of you probably, I doubt you actually did it, but you could even trace that, right? There is a periodical schedule that concerns the video topics, right? And given that thing, together with von Clausewitz, was the one that I had when I got heartbroken, I had this mental distress, I abandoned it. I began to make from December, rather, because that was the peak of my disease, the say more manualistic based content, like kind of more general things. I also started this series about the historical origin series that you love, apparently. You always watch them because of the aforementioned, mostly ethno-nationalistic reasons. Because, oh wow, there's my country there. Yeah, but again, if you just know about your country, you don't know about it at all, right? Let's cancel also this delusion that people know anything about their country just because they're living in it. In order to understand something complex like a country, you have to be, like, I can't claim I know my country well, for example. Even if I traveled extensively across it very often, I just studied history in detail, but like, it's not that I can't say as a person I know my country, because it's exactly because I was raised here, is that I know that it's such a complex reality that I can't afford to know. I wrote a 700 pages doctorate thesis about the, also I was my country, in the Middle Ages for just 60 years, and I don't go even remotely close to pretend, for example, that I know very well my country during those 60 years. What it means well, right? If you mean in absolute terms, I knew it very poorly. Of course, I knew it maybe better than anybody else in those 60 years from a military point of view. No doubt, I do. Right? But I don't set my standards on other people. I set my standards on the truth. Right, and if others also did this, would also be much more humble. So actually, one of the best ways to know your country is to confront it with other countries. Because if you don't do that, how can you give a dimension of the importance of your country? I discovered that most people in Europe, everywhere here, like they just know, they don't know anything about the history of their own country, but they think they do, and they accept the fact that they don't know the history of other countries, even neighboring ones or some of the most important ones or whatever. And it's like, as if, to me, these are blind people roaming around with no purpose, because what's the point of even living if you, don't know how to orient yourself? What kind of, below, say, underground standards, let's put it this way, you must have some negatively valuable, negatively measurable level of knowledge you can have, right? And how do you substantiate yourself as a person by living in a world where you literally do not know these things? That's my constant reaction to most people. And again, it's become the easiest thing in the world understanding when a person is just zero, right? For example, I travel a lot, but I don't brag much about it, because I got allergic to all those people that have to show you on Instagram or, making lists on social network where they have been. I don't know. I've visited 30 countries so far. Yeah, but do you know even anything about them? And then you discover, of course, that they don't, but they in order to make up for that, they say, because I know the culture of that. Yeah, because you've been, I don't know, 7 days in a Thailand, Thai culture or history or anything. How does it even come into your mind, right? I have like a more kind of 17th century grand tour idea of what visiting a country should be about, and leaving the place, the land, the history, the culture, the people, the food. That's the reason, for example, in a sense, why I also had only foreign girlfriends, by the way. And to me, that's having a part of it. I've been also, too, tens of times in single countries. that are, ever since I was a child, they are part of me, because I came to learn also the history and also the literature and etc. I see none of this anywhere, right? And that's why what I also try to put in my videos that is quite neglected or bypassed, right? Again, when the topic doesn't fit your taste, is because I can see what your bias. I can see from the views that every time I make a video about a certain topic, you snob it. And I understand in that very moment, even if I can't see your face as voice individually because it's anonymous, what the general feeling of the audience is, and what the general background of the audience is, and why, and what's the problem in the first place. And that's why I also modulate my content on that base, right? So that I could, if I wanted, I could probably boom tomorrow by just making videos that cover the topics that you just overclick on. But I won't, right? Because I have a long-term project, and first of all, I also have my own standards, and principles that I will not fundamentally modify across the time. But this year I had to do that because, incidentally, not because it was, I was doing it on purpose or surrendering to it, because, doing the most complex research on kind of more developed topics, etc., was too hard for my mental state. And so I began mostly to talk about making more discursive videos, like those 1 hour and a half videos about certain specific medieval history topics. This was mostly late autumn, winter, and spring. Then I began the historical region series on a regular basis. That was quite useful, and I will keep doing it because actually was very useful also for me, because sometimes you study these countries in general, but you never get into the actual local issues. So that is precious, and I see basically I'm the only person doing this on the internet, and you like it. They get views, and so, yeah, why not? I'm apt to that. In fact, I will keep doing this, right? So my purpose is, of course, in theory, right? I don't know. My plan is to continue Schwerpunkt for a long time, even though I know perfectly well that life can bring you elsewhere. But it's something I won't abandon willingly, right? So you can be sure at least about that. And I'm starting to make also an important, let's say, amount of, I'm not talking about money or income. It's something specific now I can't discuss, but let's say it's helpful. Right, it's all one with my job, by the way. It helps me tremendously. It helped me. I think I got more from Schwerpunkt, making Schwerpunkt, than from my doctorate, literally, that I did basically in the same years of Schwerpunkt. So it was a great experience, and it made me see life, history, the world in ways I would never believe. And that's the point, right? When I say that even scholars, professionals, they're too hyper-specialized, hyper-focused on certain things, it's because they don't study anything comparatively, diachronically. So nobody really knows what in another country was like. If I ask, my university professors, they wouldn't know, right? Even my colleagues, right? What the hell do they know about another country, right? In general, yes, but it's not they even understand maybe really the big basis, because they are excellent in their field of research, but the rest is abandoned, so that they can't connect the dots anymore. And that's why we're collapsing morally and scientifically, because even the top, the elite, is not doing what they should be doing. Instead, what I'm doing, I think, first of all, it's very entertaining for me, and it can be very useful for others, and that's why I'm doing this. So I would like to resume von Clausewitz at some point, but I think I will stick to this kind of topics, right? But I resumed at least from a couple of months the older cycle of videos, and it's been working very well so far, so I plan to go on like this without fear, let's put it this way. And I count on filling the gaps of this wide net that is my content, that should be understood as a complex, as a system, as a whole, right? You can't, again, follow this content by saying, okay, well, just watch this video, the other doesn't matter. No, it's all one, right? I know that the whole world is becoming lazy. What they want is something hyper, narrow, so that their mind doesn't make too much effort to pour the years. But no, right? This doesn't work like it. It's the exact opposite, right? And I'm not going to tolerate any other form of approach. And that's why I also have to make cleansing of those who come here with pretty strange ideological backgrounds and do not accept reality for what it is, or they don't really get anywhere with what they're telling you. Because again, if I were challenged constantly by people who, I see, they're hitting at my points, they're spending, they're writing so much, they're, so historically, well, there is no one there, no one. I can say even like 1, 2, 3, like there are. Again, on small topics, maybe, yes, we find somebody that, writes interesting things, by the way, even if it's criticizing the content, I allowed it some extra historical notion. To me, it's fine. I like being corrected when the person who corrects is actually competent, and I always appreciate that. But it stops there. It's extremely rare. And the rest is not here. It's as if the audience were dumb, right? I would like you to talk a bit more, right? Or possibly saying sensible things, please, because I also get, honestly, as I was saying before, I get people who are, I don't know if we're searching for comfort and or some strange sense of, I don't know, I don't have morbid connections like people that are obsessed with me, but sometimes I see I attract the type, the neurotic type that needs, for example, to hyperwrite in the comments repeatedly, and that it's not, that if I keep allowing, I'm not really helping as a person, right? So I have to be strict sometimes, but just be aware that, yeah, this is a point of connection between us, but I am me and you are you. So there is something you can get from what is going on, and we are supporting each other essentially. But it's this broader mechanism, it's Schwerpunkt that must, in this sense, grow. When you say that Schwerpunkt is you, well, yeah, I am, but it's the content. It's not me personally, right? And that's why I count about this, because again, you don't know even who I am, and that's interesting enough. Many people say, "Wow, where you come from, etc." Others think where I come from, another place, or sure, this guy comes from here, from there. That's funny, object. That's entertaining, and it helps a little bit. Also increasing curiosity, and it makes that's the kind of jokes that I accept. But there is a deeper sense of, let's say, if we want this channel to grow, let's not waste time with it. Let's understand exactly what this is about, and let's not make it something different, right? That's a problem I had. Like, let's assume this channel booms, and a great, at some point in a great part of my followers are alt-writers. There's not much I can do at that point about that. So as long as I am in control of this broader dynamic, I think, of course, that would amplify also my communicational capacity. But let's say I don't want to create a wrong idea about what this thing is, right? And the only way to do it is understanding the context, and that's what the main issue is. So last year I also stopped making video updates. I used to make like every 100 videos one, right? So a bit more than 3 months. I made an update that said, I don't know, say 1,000 videos, 4,000 subscribers. And I made a video about the channel, how it's faring, the stats, where I get most views from. It was nice because it was a way to acquaint also with the new subscribers, what was doing this for, what I was thinking, how I was doing. And if you have any question, you can always ask both in the comments and privately. I also make question and answer videos, for that matter, about these topics that some of you find fascinating for some reason. So yeah, the broader reflections about what I do, it's interesting rather than just talking about history. We can talk about it's always about history. Everything is about history. All human life is history. But also this broader perspective is important at times. So I don't really know. I plan for this autumn to make, as I was saying before, important content, and I'll see whether I can get. But sometimes just even making the usual one is enough, right? Every once in a while you see a video reaching very great heights. For example, visualization time was a record was broken the other day in that video, I think, about why the Romans chose to be Germans, which surpassed anything I'd done before. So I see there are these kind of shoulder pushes that help the channel expanding, and that I see just right now, new subscribers, etc. And I do foresee this channel to take off, and I will make a video soon about that too, because I want to instill this sense of comeback, right? It's very important morally, because at a point also last year saying, what do I do this for? Like the channel had dropped and said, this is going to be revived. Now I see it's coming back, and I see it's coming back because of the good reasons that had kept it up before. So the dark clouds passing make the sun shining again in a way, and make us see things that different light. And so I speak a lot about motivation, moral force, and all these things. And I think that what I'm doing here is meaningful regarding that, because I could simply say, what the hell? Well, why should I do this? Right? I would have a lot of more free time without Schwerpunkt. I would work much better. I would relax much better. I would do many things. But at the end of the day, I ask myself, but what would you do? Like, what is that, is worth, like, you're doing something here that is really talking to a lot of people about things that they seemingly want to know, and that they receive positively, and that seem to have to be important for them. Sometimes I receive messages saying, Schwerpunkt, you helped me even in a difficult time. There are people telling, I went through harsh time, like the same one I've gone through, and your videos help. And I say, but I really talk about history. I talk about violence. I talk about war in general. I talk about politics, strategy. Yeah, but I also understand, in fact, that's the point. That's the cultural, civilizational hierarchy that we've been deprived of, and that doesn't make thus things go well. If it's not there, it's not understood. So getting a meaning from history, that's powerful, because it's real. It's not an opinion. It's my there's a video made, I think, a couple of years ago, when I was asking myself, is Schwerpunkt historically reliable? And I think today would make much more interesting video, really. But I realized objectively that by talking about history, I talk about reality. I talk about what actually happened. I'm not, even though I do have my philosophy of history, as you understand, but I it's not like a ghost that blurs everything and you can't distinguish it. No, I'm actually explaining things, because I think that love for historical knowledge substantiates in itself what I say, what I explain things like. And I must confess, I'm the first one to be amazed by it, because it makes sense, right? It's very strange when you realize how complex history is, how difficult it is to measure moral forces. That actually, the more you study it, the more it makes sense. The more you feel human, in a sense, the more you realize what the point of this all really is. And it's not just abstract. It's, again, as I often discuss in also history of religion, so there is a very specific, concrete point to the question of what to do existentially that is revealed by that. And I think, in fact, most conservatives nowadays, also political commentaries, etc., do not get that point. right? I've been disappointed lately very much by some figures that I also follow, and that I, generally speaking, I appreciate, but that either they market themselves or they are being marketed as something else, right? Increasing fear, increasing the sense of doom. From one side, you need that, but there should be also a constructive side to warn people, but you should also build something in the first place. So just even from a conservative perspective, always whining about the left doing bad things. Yeah, I mean, one that is surely useful, right? But you should also build something that doesn't work in function of that, right? It's fighting evil, just being on the same level of evils is sometimes playing by their own rules, right? Even concentrating on the primary. Some things are evil objectively, just like, enforcing like some kind of ideologies, or bringing into some kind of mutilations, or even killing people, frankly, through abortion, even actually making children born and right through labor, right, even though they're already alive since conception, and being killed afterwards. This is actually being done. That's sick, and that shouldn't be just a matter of political commentary. That should really drive the greatest force and outrage and strength and power, and I'm fully for that. But let's say still also just being reactive towards all the rest of cheap bullshit that also bring massively to those things that happen at every comma, and pretending that those people even have individually a power, or that what they're saying is even worth being, acknowledged. In my opinion, that's the problem. You should build your alternative. And much of the loss of the sacred is not just being, hey, I'm a Christian, I go to church, so I know what sacred is. No, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that anymore, because the entire culture is decayed. There is not even there agnostic heresies such as, the left is utter trash. They're doing terrible things and bad. So the right instead are pure angels. No, because they're part of the same people. They're part of the same culture. They're part of the same civilization. So actually, the reason why there is some such kind of lowness is, direct responsibility also of the other side. That in fact it's not impressive at all, right? And I discovered these things just how deeply interconnected they are, because people don't care. For example, I made that video about why it was a provocative clickbait, and it did work, but it was not a clickbait, meaning that that the content didn't satisfy people. But let's say we arrived to the point where people identify like groups just on the base of a dictum, and they don't even listen to they don't make that work, right, to actually see how somebody dismantles the whole thing. So it takes a lot to habituate people to that thinking, so that it's like those motivational conservative productions that are done. They're somewhat relativistic in nature. They nail the point in kind of in direction, but they don't tell you what's there. I think history shows you what's there, but not metaphorically, like meaning, let's study the deep causes of history, and I will reveal you where to go. No, I mean literally looking at the values that humans had, and not the provocative, weird, stupid, mystifications that you use today to think that those were the values. In fact, this knowledge is practically unknown to contemporary culture. No, it doesn't exist in the political language. It doesn't exist even in the forbidden, in the censored one. It's not part of that bag. That's just those are just some of the lowest cultural, achievements of mankind. Before there was something else. And no, even if you're a conservative, you don't understand anything about them. You basically could have been a hardcore conservative your entire life and never even having known that they existed. And by scale of moral force. They have nothing to do with anything of what you represent. And that's the power that we should search for. The power of life, the moral force, and the ultimate goal, the doctrine of self-sacrifice, and more, because that must be applied to in reality. So, of course, my entire life now revolves around these topics, and to me, it's, I feel ridiculous saying these things and making YouTube videos. I should really prove self-sacrifice, but I think that in a way I am sacrificing a lot of what I could have for making these points. And what I would say, is believe me, it's not easy to explain them, because some of you may say, well, but you say these things all the time, but you also don't quite get to the point very often. Like, what is that we should believe? But the point is that it's the same historical videos that make the point. And if you don't listen to them, and if you just snob them on the base of of the title, or the base of the content, and what kind of country it is, or if it is the other thing you can't stand is you don't watch Christian history videos. If I make a video on the papacy, nobody gives a damn. How can you even start to pretend, to dream, to know, to imagine that you can claim to know anything even remotely consistent about any aspect of medieval history if you don't study massively, but I mean massively, tens, hundreds of books of papal history? Well, how can you even conceive that? But you haven't understood anything about this whole thing we're doing here. That's the point where you have to wake the fuck up. Because that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about when I say that I'm not here to flatter you. If you're just a dirty ignorant that has those kind of cultural standards, what are you even here for? That's the point. You cannot afford a choice because you don't have one. You never had one, especially since you started to reason like that, or to think something. That's the point I make all the time. So I will always be that harsh and intolerant, because that's exactly the force that brings me to be. Like, I wouldn't say these things if I hadn't tested them working in reality. And that's the sad realization. You see, it's even Christian history is something that goes beyond even. Let's assume that you have some idiosyncrasies towards Christianity in the first place, for some cultural and historical reason that I actually am aware of, but that of course I don't give a cent about, because it just reveals how limited you can be. But the reason why I say this, it's not because I'm here to parade Christianity or any other religion for that matter, but it is because if you can't know Christianity, if you deliberately refuse to learn something that informed the entire history of civilization for 2,000 years all over the world, because it doesn't matter what other religions are there, the Westerners took over the world and Christianity remained central to the whole freaking thing in so many ways. How can you dimension the actual meaning that Christianity has within the frame of a much bigger topic and issue? That is what I'm gradually introducing to this channel, by the way. That is what actually Christianity also substantiates itself from. I'm talking about the older universal tradition, right? You still reason, again, in a perfectly communistic, deterministic, materialistic, relativistic way, even if you're a conservative, because you basically draw lines. You say, this is not part of well, it's like the thing I said about the countries before, right? You just separate the thing from reality. I see this tendency, even just as a request. The people on the internet want to know the most tiny, material, stupid kind of aspect. Like, I remember once for example, I started a series, just make you understand how things work. I think 2-3 years ago, I began that series of medieval law that I make every once in a while, because one guy wrote me saying, yeah, I love your topics, but why don't you make a video on medieval pillaring or medieval law, right? Because, I'm interested in pillaring. And I said, medieval law, that's interesting. Like, this guy wants to talk about pillaring. That's kind of weird. Like, what kind of video do you want to, like, first of all, how is it a central topic? Like, first of all, I could understand, like, how people were tortured, all the various instruments or types of kind of punishments in general, how they were. I was mostly attracted from the juridical aspect that is deeply foundational of any civilizational value. And so I thought, yeah, I will start a series of medieval law. So I made a first video about, I don't know, I think about was the, Ignatius, the revival of Roman law. And the same guy answered saying, yeah, that's kind of cool. It was a wide video talking about properly the importance of the revival of Roman law, the background, why they started doing that, what was the juridical tradition before up to that point, why politically they began to resume that, what was the context, explaining what Roman law in that sense functioned like, a very big civilizational thing. And this guy, yeah, I like this video, but, what about pillaring? I kept making videos about medieval jurisprudence, and I never found that guy commenting again. But I remain perfectly aware of the fact that people's attention is ever more childlike. I was told when I was in high school that apparently when we were 15 years old, we had just had a 20 minutes attention span, right? Which also makes you reflect on time spent in school, for that matter, entire hours, but how much you could get. But it's also about discipline, and that's important. I get sometimes impression that the average time span attention of an adult is something like 4 minutes. Like, how can you be interested in pillaring, like in a scale of values? That's pretty weird to me. But I see this replicated in patterns. Right. First of all, just about pillaring, it was just a form of, punishment. But where does it lead to? What do you think the history of pillaring is? Even assuming somebody wrote about it, which surely happened at some point. But it would have been a pretty lame thing. Yes, they used pillaring, and pillaring, I don't know, was inflicted for this. Crimes usually in this context, at least there is some study about here and there, and that these guys were exposed there for Sunday. And then, what do you think that, you're going to be enlightened by knowing these things? Like, what's the actual purpose in your existence to waste time listening to me talking about pillaring? It's like, there's another follower, for example, that asked me, and it gets kind of repeated, like, this was a more developed thing that I realized the interest in, but still, right, the fact that it's isolated just in this sense is quite eloquent. Like, why don't you talk about when early medieval Rome were, when it was kind of the population had shrunk and there were forests within the city. And I never made that video because I could even make one at some point, but still it would be kind of more detailed in a way. Not much about the emptiness of Rome, which could hardly be any at that point, but rather, what was the city like at that time, right? Why would I have to talk about, the idea of that the city had shrunk in population when still there was it was the largest population in Western Europe still in early medieval times, and still a massive amount also of buildings that were being built at the time, some of the greatest masterpieces in, European art and, culture, etc., of architecture of the time, and not talking about those instead. I think a few years ago I saw a video that said, Rome when it was depopulated after the early Middle Ages. Why isn't there an attention towards, there is an attention towards lack of reality. The attention should be towards reality. It should be about the importance of Rome in those times, the buildings, the expanded, the very intense activity that existed there. No, people want to annihilate, want to destroy. They're iconoclasts fundamentally. They want to reason as if there is ever less to know, to make themselves feel comfortable about knowing less, not about knowing more. The entire universal tradition is based on the exact opposite. You should have a knowledge bulimia to feel anything accomplished, right? And that's not knowledge, that's lack of knowledge. And the explanations very often in these videos and clickbaits are stupid. I will have to make a video about historical videos, clickbaits, titles, and pictures to identify psychologically immediately what's the target that these people use to make those videos. And even explaining, like, just like you see them because you have suggested videos. Byzantine economy explained, briefly, in brackets, length of the video 13 minutes. Even assuming that you were able to concisely explain Byzantine economy, so 1,000 years of history condensed in 13 minutes, the question is, what kind of relevance would this have for the person who listens? Right? Will this person have an actually expandable knowledge to positively apply somewhere in their lives? If this is like kind of a curiosity thing, the question should be, first of all, why Byzantine economy? Because first of all, again, people fixate about the idea that there is a Byzantine world and that's the only thing that counts. So first of all, this videos would perhaps be like more concerned with the actual administration of the empire, the taxes, the things. It maybe talks about that, but in a sense, economy is something much wider. The same Byzantine Okayaka, from which the same the economy comes from, reveals that since ancient Greece, by the way. So it's a much more complex topic that could offer a much wider variety of knowledge to people. 30 minutes. And first of all, can't you guess essentially what Byzantine economy could be? Because it's not that, in the pre-industrial world, the economies of countries was substantially different, right? Especially empires or very territorially extended countries. They worked all in the same identical way, right? The only things that change is that, the wealth distribution was in charge of meaningful things. But, why would you need also to know about economy and not, for example, about something a bit more spiritual in nature? This idea that everything works because of economies. If anything, economy works because of other things. Primarily also people's minds, right? And trying to understand the latter perhaps would be a bit better, which surely in 13 minutes of somebody just talking about some kind of materialistic bias, I think that you can't afford to get. You see, the average person doesn't even imagine this. I don't know how many minutes it took me to explain this, maybe 4, 5, 6, I don't know, half the time, the 30-minute videos. But surely this is a much more useful methodologically for a person development than anything has been said in that video, right? Let's say, I understand that marketing requires also squeezing people's ignorance and stupidity and incapacity, and that's perfectly fine, right? I have nothing against that, right? I don't say that I'm a capitalist just because capitalist is a word that communists invented to design people they want to steal property from. So no, that's just the natural way humans interact. It doesn't have a capitalism or whatever, right? It always existed, and it's not an invention, and we shouldn't have our language polluted by these insanities. And by this, you see, it's a degeneration towards the detail. It's a degeneration towards the emptiness, towards an empty vessel, right? Something that doesn't fit the broader picture, but fixates for the reason of itself. And that's why, before I was saying, was fixating also when I was getting paranoid with heartbreak. That's evil, that's bad, that's the dark, right? The light is the opposite direction. And it comes from struggle and victory. And that's what we should get. Right, but I could make long examples of how this darkness instead is permeating basically any form of, of entertainment, whatever. And and alleged, educational content, like TED talks that pass from being actual scientific talks to people making ideological propaganda devoid of any scientific evidence. Right? It's probably a shift towards the emotions, towards the darker side, towards any lack of discipline, authority, order, rationality. This is what's happening, and of course there is an interest also for making this happening. But I think I'm rowing backwards. Of course, my view of life has become darker in a sense, but I think it's also lighter from the other side. As soon as you have both, things work. If you don't get this, there's gonna be very serious problems, right? And again, it's like when I make those videos on Maurice of Nassau or Gustavus Adolphus. Somebody arrives and say, "Oh, wow, Gustavus Adolphus, so great, this video is so great, he was a great reformer, you know." I talked about him for an hour and a half. However, this person doesn't show up anymore. Because they are just there to proselytize their own delusions. It's not that they are even listening to the video. Right? Or even if they do, they don't understand that. Because maybe those are counterintuitive. Because knowledge and rationalities are counterintuitive in a sense. I mean, they work with a set of evidence that at least has to be arranged in a way that is not much intuitive but instinctive, or instinctively speaking. And these people are mostly dominated by instincts rather than reason. That's how I see that like. And mostly intuition sometimes is just people pretending, most conspiracy theories are true, and saying, that's what intuition does. It's not intuition. Intuition is knowing how to fill the gaps because you already know a lot about certain things and you can't actually sense that it's likely, in a rational sense, also to assess something, not inventing castles in the air and pretending them to be true so that you can make yourself feel better about your own delusions. And this is instead, in my opinion, what is happening all around. So, my videos are not for everyone. I realize that, but they're not because people choose to be everyone. And they always have a control on that. I don't know, I could add really a lot of things because I think these thoughts are really going freely at some point. I just believe that we must continue in this exercise, never giving up, never pretending that this is debatable. Right? That's what instead is being eroded, and sure, I will never give up to that. It seems always to live in a world that ever less is willing to accept that, and so it's ever more alien to it. It's also an unsettling feeling, but at the same time, it makes you see things a bit more clearly, and I'm interested in finding out how it goes, let's say. And so many things actually happening this year that I could talk about, but I don't think they're necessary to be discussed, but we will perhaps discuss them at another point. I would like to find a way to conclude this, but I just can't think of any. So just for today, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming content. And for now, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.